The first time I saw his face, it was on the wall of the local police box. It was a thin man's face, drawn in flat pencil gray. Soft eyes, straight eyebrows, a long nose with a slight bump, a small mole near the corner of the mouth. He looked calm. That bothered me more than anything. If someone had told me, this is a math teacher, or this is a train station clerk, I would have believed it. But the red letters over his head said something else. Wanted, information. Underneath were details I was still too young to fully understand. Serious incident. Middle school girl. Attacked on way home. Please contact if you recognize this man. I was 10 years old. The year was 1996. Our town had just gotten its first big supermarket and everyone said we were becoming more convenient. That word tasted different after he appeared. Convenience meant more people, more cars, more faces. And somewhere among them was a man whose face was now on every wall. The victim, let's call her Emmy, lived 2 streets away from me. She was 3 years older and sometimes walked past our house in her sailor-style uniform, white socks pulled up neatly, hair in a short bob that swung when she laughed with her friends. I didn't know her personally. To me she was part of the scenery of older kids, the ones who knew how to use the train and stay out late. One November evening, she didn't come home. Everyone in the neighborhood remembers that night differently. Some remember the search parties with flashlights. Some remember the way the school announced it the next morning, too calm, too controlled. I remember my mother locking our front door for the first time before sunset. They'll find her, my father said, staring at the TV. But they didn't. Not alive, anyway. They found her in a narrow strip of weeds between the river path and the train tracks, the kind of limbo space where no one really feels responsible. What they said on the news was simple. She was attacked. There are signs of a struggle. We believe she resisted. What they didn't say, but what the parents in the neighborhood whispered, was worse. We got a letter from school a few days later. It said things like be careful when walking alone and if you see anything suspicious, tell an adult immediately. No one said murder out loud around children. They didn't have to. The posters said it for them. The police used the word composite for the picture they made. They interviewed a woman who'd been walking her dog near the river that evening. They interviewed a delivery driver who'd seen a man in a dark jacket near the school gate. They interviewed an elderly man who thought he'd heard a girl's voice around the time it happened. From fragments of memory, his eyes were kind of narrow, he had hair to about here, he looked like he was in his 30s, maybe, they built a face. That face multiplied. Convenience store windows. The post office. The community center. The train station pillars. Everywhere I went, he was there. At first, I thought all the posters were identical. But the more I stared, the more I saw tiny differences. On some, his jaw seemed a little sharper. On others, his hairline a bit higher. It took me a long time to understand why. They weren't all original. Some had been copied, rephotographed, reprinted. Each time, the lines blurred or darkened. Each time, a new version of his face was born. By spring, I had a habit. On my way home from school, I'd stop in front of the police box, stand on tiptoe, and compare the sketch to the men walking past. Salarymen. Delivery workers. Teenagers on bikes. Old men walking tiny dogs. Could it be him? What about that one? I didn't know exactly what he had done, but I knew it was something that made adults switch off the TV when I walked into the room. Something that made my mother grab my arm when we passed narrow streets. Every man between 20 and 50 became suspicious. Every passing face felt like a possible answer. Years passed. The posters faded. Some were taken down and replaced with polite announcements about traffic safety or local festivals. But he never disappeared completely. He just moved. From the police box wall to the inside of the Coben window. From convenience store glass to the bulletin board at the city hall. From printed paper to late-night TV specials. Unsolved after 5 years, the narrator would say. Can you help identify the man in this composite sketch? I was 15 when they first did a year-end Unsolved case show with his face on it. The host gestured to a large screen. The same calm eyes. The same straight nose. The same mole. This man may have changed his hairstyle or aged over time, the host said, but we believe his overall facial structure remains similar. Beside the original sketch, they showed an aged version. Lines at the mouth. Slight shadows under the eyes. It was the same man, but older. I remember a strange thrill in my chest. Up until then, he'd been frozen. Now he was moving through time with the rest of us. Growing older. Somewhere. With us. Later, when I moved to Tokyo for university, I thought I'd leave him behind. Big city, new life, no more childhood ghosts. For a while, it worked. Tokyo has too many faces to fixate on one. But unsolved cases don't really stay in one place. They float. They become shorthand. Be careful walking home at night, my dorm manager said. You remember that case from your prefecture, right? The girl by the river? They never caught him. People would say, it was like that case, about other incidents. The sketch appeared in one of my criminology textbooks in a section about police art. I saw it by accident, turning the page, and felt the same small shock as when you unexpectedly see someone from your hometown in a huge city. Ah, the professor said when he noticed my expression. That one. Terrible case. Still unsolved. He tapped the page. Interesting thing about composites, they're always a negotiation. Witness memory is slippery. Artists interpret. The result is not the real face. It's a possible face. A possible face. A face that might match hundreds of people partially, but no one perfectly. That explanation should have comforted me. It didn't. Instead, it gave my imagination permission to do what it had wanted to do all along. Start seeing him everywhere. You notice strange things when you commute at the same time every day. The woman who always eats bread on the platform. The man who always reads the same newspaper, even as the date changes. The high school couple who quarrel and make up in the same 5 steps. And then there was the man whose face I couldn't quite stop staring at. I first saw him on the trolley line, standing near the doors. He was in his 40s maybe. Plain jacket. Messenger bag. Short hair. Nothing obviously threatening. But when he turned his head to look at the station announcement screen, the profile of his nose caught the fluorescent light just so, and my body reacted before my brain did. I knew that nose. I knew that particular slope, that small bump on the bridge. I knew how his eyebrows sat above his eyes. I had traced those lines with my eyes for years. My heartbeat sped up. Don't be ridiculous, I told myself. He's just a man on a train. But when he shifted his weight and his mouth relaxed, the corner lifted slightly, revealing a small dark dot near the lip. A mole. The train jolted, and so did I. Suddenly I was 10 years old again, standing on tiptoe in front of the police box. The poster, the face, the red letters. Wanted, information. The announcement chime sounded. Next station. The man stepped off as the doors opened, swallowed instantly by the crowd. I stood there gripping the rail, my skin prickling. By the time I reached my station, I had convinced myself it was a trick of the light, an overactive memory. Tokyo is full of people. Of course some of them will resemble a drawing made years ago. But that night, I dreamed of Emmy. Not of her dying, or of newspapers, or of police tape. Just of her walking past our house again, sailor uniform swaying, while behind her, every window and billboard and car mirror reflected the same man's face instead of her own. You can live like that for a long time, telling yourself it's coincidence, avoiding certain thoughts, changing the channel when familiar lines appear on the screen. The shock wears off. Life gets busy. You get a job, pay rent, answer emails. The past thins out, becomes something you occasionally touch with your fingers and pull away from. Then, one day, it tears. For me, that day came 15 years after the case. I had come back to my hometown for Oban, the summer festival when we honor the dead. The town looked smaller. The supermarket that was new in my childhood was now old and slightly dirty, replaced in trend by a shiny convenience store near the station. My parents' hair had more gray. The riverbank where they'd found Emmy was now lined with neatly trimmed bushes and a sign about safety and community. I was walking past the old police box on my way back from buying drinks when I saw it. A new poster. The same face. Not the original composite, and not the aged one I'd seen on TV years earlier. This was a third version. The headline said, "Unsolved case, information wanted renewed appeal." Below it, the artist had drawn the man as he might look now. Late 40s. Slight wrinkles around the eyes. A deeper line from nose to mouth. The mole was still there. The calm expression was still there. The caption said that new forensic techniques had been used to re-examine evidence. That they believed the suspect was still alive. That they were once again asking the public for help. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just that his face was back. It was something off about the new drawing. I realized with a cold jolt what it was: the nose. It was exactly the same. Not just in shape, but in the way the shading lay, the tiny curve of the nostril. It was as if someone had cut the nose out of the original composite and pasted it onto an older man's face. Same with the eyes. The mole. Only the frame around them had changed. Like a mask stretched over a different skull. Someone walking past must have seen my expression. "Ah," an older woman said knowingly. "That case. Terrible, isn't it? Still not solved." She glanced at the sketch and then at me. "For a while everyone was looking at each other's faces like that," she said with a little laugh. "You were still a child then, right? You don't remember how bad it was." "Oh," I said. "I remember." She nodded. "Back then," she said, "people saw him everywhere. On trains, in shops, on the news. My husband even called the hotline once because he thought he saw someone who looked exactly like him at the pachinko parlor." "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "The police checked. Said it wasn't a match. But after that, my husband started seeing him in his dreams. Said the man was sitting at the next machine, not playing, just watching him." She laughed again, but her hand went unconsciously to her throat as if remembering a pressure there. "Too much TV," she said, and walked away. I stood there alone with the poster. The man's eyes seemed to slide slightly, adjusting to meet mine. Of course they weren't. It was just the quality of the print. But for the first time, a thought that had never occurred to me before entered my mind like a splinter. What does he see when he looks at us? That night, I couldn't sleep. The fan in my childhood room clicked softly with every rotation. Cicadas screamed outside as if the insects were being boiled alive. I got up to drink water and saw my reflection in the dark window. For a second, my heart stopped. It looked like the sketch. Not perfectly, of course. I was younger. My eyebrows were different. But in the poor lighting, the shape of my face, the line of my nose, the shadow near the corner of my mouth. I turned on the light quickly, breaking the illusion. Still, the unease remained. How many men in this town, in this country, in this world, had that combination of features? How many could be mistaken for the composite in a bad photo, in dim light, from a distance? I suddenly understood something the professor had said years earlier. The danger of composite sketches isn't only that they might point to the wrong person. It's that they might spread the suspect's face so thin across the population that he becomes everyone. The next day, I did something impulsive. I went to the prefectural police headquarters. It felt wrong, like I was trespassing on something sacred. The building was tall and gray, the lobby echoing with the sound of footsteps and paperwork. At the information desk, I hesitated, then said, "I grew up near the scene of an unsolved case from 1996. I saw the new poster." I was wondering if any of the original investigators are still here. The woman at the desk looked at me with professional politeness. This is related to new information, she asked. Yes, I lied. I think so. She made a phone call. After a few minutes, a man in his 50s came down. He wore plain clothes, but his posture said police more clearly than any uniform. I'm Officer N, he said. I was a junior member of the team back then. What did you want to discuss? We sat in a small meeting room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. I told him I was a local, that the case had always bothered me, that I'd seen the new sketch. It looks different, I said carefully. But also the same. I was wondering who drew it. He studied me for a moment. Why? He asked. I'm interested in how these things change over time, I said. Whether eyewitness descriptions were updated, or if you used computer software. He leaned back. The first composite was drawn by a police artist who has since retired, he said. The new one was generated with software based on that original and age progression models. No new eyewitnesses came forward. Why do you ask? I swallowed. It's just that, I hesitated, feeling ridiculous. It sometimes feels like the face is adapting. Like it's borrowing features from people around us. I expected him to laugh. He didn't. Instead, he stared at the table for a long moment, then said quietly, You're not the first person to say that. A chill ran up my spine. What do you mean? I asked. He scratched his cheek, considering. Back when the first composite went up, he said, we got a lot of calls. People sure they'd seen him. People sure it was their neighbor, their boss, their ex. That's normal, right? I said. Yes, he said. Normal. But there were patterns. We'd follow up on a tip, look at the man they reported, see no real match, and move on. Weeks or months later, someone else from a completely different part of town would call about a different man, and somehow, the way they described him had shifted slightly, closer to the first one we'd checked. He looked at me. It was as if every time we ruled someone out, he said, the next description borrowed one of that person's features. A different hairstyle here, a new wrinkle pattern there. By the third year, the composite sketch artist refused to update the drawing anymore. He said, if I keep changing it, I'm not drawing a criminal, I'm drawing the town. My mouth was dry. What happened to him? I asked. The artist? Officer N shrugged. Retired. Moved away. But before he left, he gave me something. He opened a folder he'd brought and slid a photocopy across the table. It was the original composite. I knew it well. But seeing it on plain white paper, without slogans, without red letters screaming wanted, made it feel different. Smaller. Almost ordinary. The new poster you saw, he said, is based entirely on this. No new witnesses. No artist decisions. Just algorithms stretching and wrinkling the same face, year after year. He tapped the paper. This man may exist, he said. Or he may never have existed exactly like this. He's a negotiation, like you said. A meeting point of fear and memory. He looked at me sharply. Why does that bother you? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know how to say it without sounding insane. Because I think I saw him on the train. Because sometimes when I wake up at night, I see him reflected in my dark window instead of my own face. Because when I look at this drawing long enough, I can imagine my father's youth in it, and my own future. Instead, I said. Because it feels like he's still out there. And that he knows what his picture looks like. Officer N's eyes didn't leave mine. Between you and me, he said quietly, I think he probably does. How? I asked. He shrugged. Posters, TV, the internet. If he's alive, he's seen it. Maybe he's even stood in front of it and checked how he measures up now. He stood. The case is still open. If you remember anything concrete, call us. Otherwise, live your life. Don't let a drawing own your face. On my way out, I passed a bulletin board. There he was again, in color this time. The same calm eyes. The same nose. The same mole. My own reflection hovered faintly over his. For a second, we overlapped perfectly. That night, I took the last train back to Tokyo. The carriage was half full. Office workers, students, a couple arguing quietly at the far end. I sat near the door, facing my reflection in the dark glass. Behind my faint ghost image, I could see other faces. A man with heavy eyelids. A teenager with similar eyebrows to the sketch. An older man with the same mole by his mouth. The train jolted, the reflections slid and merged. It hit me then that we were all carrying pieces of him. A jawline here, a nose there, an echo of his eyes in someone else's tired gaze. If he was on that train, sitting among us, maybe no one, not even me, would be able to pick him out with certainty. Maybe he no longer knew exactly which face was his own. I got off at my station and walked home fast, heart thudding. In the bathroom, I turned on the light and stared into the mirror. I took a photo with my phone. Then, hands shaking, I opened a browser tab, found a copy of the composite online, and held my picture next to it. It wasn't the same. Of course it wasn't. My hair was different. My eyebrows thicker. But the longer I stared, the more my eyes played tricks. A little adjusting of shadows, a tiny change in angle, and I closed the tab. Deleted the photo. Laughed at myself, out loud, because the apartment was too quiet. It's just a drawing, I told myself. Just a possible face. Nothing more. Still, sometimes I wonder about him. Maybe he was a real man, once. Maybe he did something unspeakable by the river and walked away, carrying the knowledge of what he'd done and the uncomfortable fame of his own sketch. Maybe he's changed his hairstyle, grown heavier, lost that calm expression. Maybe he lives 3 stations away, or in another prefecture, or in another country entirely. Or maybe he's no longer any one person. Maybe he's become a pattern. A template. A set of features that floats from face to face, never settling long enough to be caught. A borrowed face. When I think that way, I understand why the artist refused to update the drawing. If you try to draw everyone at once, you end up drawing no one. And yet, the posters stay up. The composite remains. The lines don't fade as quickly as they should. Every time someone walks past, their eyes brush the image, and for a split second they ask themselves, could it be him? They compare the sketch to their father, their neighbor, their own reflection in the glass of the convenience store door. In that moment, the man with the borrowed face lives again. Not in flesh. In suspicion. In fear. In the space between maybe and no, that's ridiculous. The case is still unsolved. The real criminal, if he ever existed, is still unnamed in any official report. But his face, or the idea of it, now belongs to all of us who grew up under that calm, printed stare. And on nights when the train window turns black and my reflection floats there, just above the faint outline of other passengers, I sometimes see another layer beneath us all. A penciled line. A mole. A neutral, patient gaze. As if, somewhere in the crowd, the original is still watching. Moving from one borrowed face to the next. Waiting for the day someone finally recognizes him completely. And realizes, too late, that the reason he looks so familiar is because he's been using their own